My name is Dacher Keltner, and I am a professor in psychology. I'm the faculty director of the Greater Good Science Center. First of all, I'd like to welcome you to UC Berkeley, and I want to congratulate you for making it here. I know how hard it is to get into Berkeley, and I know how hard you worked as high school students. This is a very intense school, and in part, what I'm hoping to convey to you is that we have wisdom around like the Greater Good Science Center and other kinds of courses that will not only sharpen your intellect, but will also sharpen your soul and your sense of well-being. And I'll talk about some of the wisdom that we work on here at UC Berkeley. This is an incredible university. It is a complicated university. I think in today's political climate, it is one of our last strongholds of real democracy and real progress. And I treat with reverence the opportunity to teach you. What I know about you is that you are one of the most economically diverse undergraduate student bodies that exists in the United States or in the world. This is not a university of the 1%. This is a university for the best and the brightest, no matter what your background. That matters enormously to me. This is a university that is part of a system that produces the most patents of any university system in the world. There is so much innovation going on at this university and the University of California more broadly, I cannot describe to you. And you will become part of that innovation and be part of the kind of the intellectual productivity and the shaping of the world through innovation and design. This is a university that is the greatest engine of upward social mobility that has ever existed in human history, right? We take students from all backgrounds and catapult them and rocket boost them into the upper realms of our social and political and economic world. And it is an honor to see you go from the young people that you are, and the next thing you know, when I go visit Google or Facebook, there's a UC Berkeley student in engineering who's literally told me last year, like, you know, well, I'm running Google now, but I didn't do too well in your class. I apologize. You know, I was an engineer, and the social sciences were a little mystifying to me. And so we take great pride in the work that you're going to do out in the world. This is not a university where we coddle people and send them to Wall Street necessarily. We really expect you to change the world in good ways. So it is a great honor to be part of that. This university matters really deeply to me personally. My mom got her PhD at UCLA and was one of the first women's studies professors in the Cal State University system. My wife got her degree from Berkeley. My brother got his degree from Berkeley. I wanted to go to Berkeley, but didn't get in as a transfer student, got my degree at UC Santa Barbara, took revenge, and here I am now, taking it out on you guys. You mofos, I'm gonna get you. So now I love you. So, and the University of California is a university that took me. I was a Pell Grant student. I grew up in a very poor part of rural California. Changed my life. Took my brother. Same story, changed his life. My best friend, Guillermo Campos, was from a poor Mexican-American family, and it changed his life. He ended up turning down Harvard Law School to go to Bolt and become a lawyer and then other kinds of activities. So it is a great privilege to teach you. So what I'd like to do today is to take you on a tour of the Lessons of Happiness, which is one of the classes that I teach at UC Berkeley. And I'm going to be a representative of the 12 social sciences that are part of our campus. The departments at UC Berkeley, as you probably have heard, we have the highest number of top 10 departments of any university in the world. Our social sciences dominate, they rock, they're an amazing array of departments. It is incredible to be part of the social sciences here at UC Berkeley. And what I'd like to do, and I hope that you get a feel for this as you move through this university, is that you sample the social sciences more broadly, right? And you think about all the different kinds of perspectives and theories and data and analytical techniques that we use to really address the fundamental problems of the day. Today what I'll talk about is the science of happiness, which I think there's no more pressing question to think about than the science of happiness from the lens of social science, and that's where I'd like to take you. And then we'll have about 15 or 20 minutes at the end of this first lecture of yours to sort of take your broad questions and your reflections and about the social sciences at UC Berkeley. If you have questions, that's my email. I respond to all emails. If you're interested in more of this, for 15 years here at Berkeley, we've been building the Greater Good Science Center thanks to a couple of Cal alumni's generosity. It is the world's leading platform for disseminating the science of happiness and all that accompanies it, which I'll talk to you about, getting it into public schools, hospitals, healthcare settings, policymakers. I've been in conversation with the Surgeon General, who was just fired by Donald Trump, Vivek Murthy, who is going to do more good. Anyway, no comments about getting this science as a fundamental dimension to healthcare. And after today's lecture, you'll hear why. So I'd like to start with an observation of a historian, Jonathan Glover. Jonathan Glover has written this remarkable book that changed my life. He's a historian, and what he did is he took stock of firsthand accounts of people's experiences during battle, right? They're in the combat, they're in the trenches of World War I, the combat or the South Pacific of World War II. They're in the jungles of Vietnam and the chaos of those battles. And what he noticed is this really striking and deeply revealing regularity of what soldiers do in combat, which is in combat, they routinely experience what he called sympathy breakthroughs. Very simply, what happens is if you're in combat and you encounter your enemy, your so-called enemy, and your superior officer is telling you to shoot and kill, very often soldiers will collapse in a state of sympathy. When they see the eyes of their adversary, the skin, the cheeks, the humanity of the person, they're overwhelmed by the sense of sympathy and caring. And that sympathy breakthrough short circuits their tendency to kill, even though their lives are on the line. Famous example of this was George Orwell, the great writer. And he wrote, what book did he write? 1984, Animal Farm, very compelling for today. He went to Spain in the 1930s to fight the fascists. He was in a little village. He had a fascist running across the street. He had him in his line with his gun, and he was about to kill him. And then he said, there was something about the fellow creaturedness of the individual, his common humanity, that made me pull back and shift to a different orientation. What this tells us is there's a side to human nature that is pro-social and compassionate and cooperative, even in the most striking of contexts, very relevant to today. That begs the question, and I think what happens in these extreme circumstances is people get down to their core nature of who they are, their core sense of purpose in life, and then they find it. Even battle, they say, I'm here to be kind or good to others. So when I start my class on human happiness with that story as a frame, what I ask students is, what does it mean to live the good life? What does it mean to have a meaningful life? What will make you happy? There's no more important question you will ask as you move your way through the intensity of Berkeley. Whether you're a school teacher or a medical doctor or a lawyer, in the end, it boils down to your idiosyncratic personal answer to, why am I here on earth? What is the purpose of life? When we consult the social sciences, as you will in your studies, what you will find is an amazing array of answers that the science is trying to honor, right? So when we look to African American studies or ethnic studies or history or economics, what we find, or anthropology, is things like the Confucianist idea of Zen, that the good life is found in bringing out the humanity of other people. You'll find in Greek philosophy the idea of moderation, that we're a bundle of passions, and I teach that in my human emotion class, and that you have to find the balance of passion. Berkeley will get a little out of balance at times. That's our very DNA. But you will strive to find balance in the multiple passions that you will discover. There's a Greek concept called eudaimonia, which is a very popular concept of finding your core purpose in the work that you do in the world that you will move through. At Berkeley, our job is to be with you as you think, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to run a community health program in Los Angeles, and I'll go to public health, right? So that is that. UC Berkeley probably has the leading set of scholars who have documented in economics and in political science, with the particular kinds of data that economists use, and the kind of policy analysis or political analysis of political science, that inequality, economic inequality, which is at historic highs in the United States, actually costs people in terms of their happiness, right? So we start to see the wisdom of social sciences. Happiness is found in hiking in the Sierras and understanding the self, being in love and laughter and democracy, which you all experience at UC Berkeley. And when I'm just in the dumps and I'm struggling to find my way, I go to Cancun Taqueria and I have a delicious chili verde burrito, and it gives me this sublime experience that very few things can approximate. And we do have some of the great food researchers here at Berkeley in our Food Research Institute. Why do we do the science of human happiness? Isn't this just, when I first got involved in this, people were like, oh yeah, you're at Berkeley, that's what you get to do. You're spending too much time cooking in a hot tub or whatever it is. But it actually is fundamentally important. And let me draw on some social sciences to tell you why this is important. Science and the wisdom of social science and the power of data. Data, in its etymology, means things that are given. So data, when we go gather different kinds of data in the social sciences, it is giving us wisdom about the human condition. So what have we learned from different social sciences about happiness? One is what I call the myth of materialism. And this is a Berkeley theme. So we know that materialistic pursuits don't make us happy. We know from research by economists like Danny Kahneman and Angus Deaton. Danny Kahneman got his PhD at Berkeley and won a Nobel Prize. That money matters very little in terms of your emotional well-being after you make $75,000 a year. So why in the world do we buy bigger cars, do long commutes, just to have more materialistic goods when it works against our happiness? It's the myth of materialism. We know, except money matters a lot for poor people, about a fifth of the United States, or a sixth of the United States, their family income is below $28,000 or so, and we need to work on that together. A second thing that the happiness literature, again from the social sciences, clarifies is what you might call the myth of individualism. Individualism, the sanctity of the self, and how we're these unique individuals, it's a great idea. There's a lot of upsides to it. The United States, as you may learn, is the most individualistic culture on the face of the earth. Berkeley, California, is the most individualistic place that has ever existed in human history. You will see people walking on Telegraph Avenue naked, shouting their poetry to the sky, and claiming that they're Berkeley professors. They probably are. But we thrive on self-expression. It is a great American tradition, but overdoing that core value can lead you astray in the pursuit of happiness and meaning. And what we learn from sociologists, like you will study here at UC Berkeley, is that the United States has had a breakdown in our social community. How many of you feel like you wish you had a little bit of a stronger community than existed as you applied for college? As you get older, you will encounter the wisdom of sociology, which shows an empirical finding. 30 years ago, Americans had 6 close friends. Today, we report we have 5. It's as if social trends have taken one of our best friends and sucked them up in a vacuum and removed them from our lives, right? So the importance of sociology tells us, with their broad data and looking at big changes in society, we've lost a little bit of our community. Our job is to reproduce it. Why does happiness matter? And here I'll make contact with intellectual relatives in public health. We have a tremendous public health program here at Berkeley, where some of these findings, some of the first findings in this literature, in fact, were produced, which is that the happiness matters as much to your physical health and the quality of your nervous system and the functioning of your immune response and the aging of your DNA, as measured in little things called telomeres, as any risk factor that the CDC is concerned about. What we have learned, and I'll summarize this really quickly, is if you feel good about life and connected to other people, it'll give you about 10 years of life expectancy. That is a bigger effect on life expectancy than eating red meat, drinking hard alcohol, and smoking. And when I talk to middle-aged groups, they always raise their hands and they're like, so if I eat red meat and smoke and drink vodka every night, it makes me happy? Does it kind of balance out? And I'm like, no, you can't make that equation. So, these are just some data showing from public health, which looks at broad health trends, life expectancy effects over time. How do sort of social practices affect your nervous system? What we learn is pursuing the good life is very good for your nervous system. Finally, if you go up to the business school, which has a lot of social scientists up there, people like Laura Cray, what you'll find is happiness is very good for your intellectual creativity and the rigor with which you solve problems. Don't let your professors lead you to believe that you need to suffer to be a great thinker, right? Because they'll make you suffer here. Because actually, you are better at solving problems and being creative and thinking of scientific solutions if you're in a positive state. Finally, why do we need happiness? We need to cultivate happiness and to build institutions and practices that allow us to pursue the good life because our culture needs it. These are a couple of illustrative findings that come from, so this is a finding from UNICEF ranking how happy the average child is with sociologists' input, nice representative samples of each culture. There are 6 different measures that go into happiness. I've plotted it so that the higher the bar, the less happy the average child in these cultures. And what you see is that Holland always wins in the happiness sweepstakes. It's the happiest place on earth. There are parts of Amsterdam that are happier than anywhere in human history. I won't speculate why. And as you move across, there you find the United States. We are second to last in the industrialized world in terms of the well-being of our children. We beat the British, and we always beat the British in everything. But that makes me worried. When you are parents, this will cause you to stay up late at night. Why are kids stressed out? Here's another amazing finding. You may have heard about this that comes from Angus Deaton and Case, who are economists, who are, again, relying on big samples of data and looking at interesting changes and trajectories over time. This basically plots the life expectancy or death rate of different kinds of groups in the industrialized world. And what we find, and think about the political relevance of this, which is that France, Germany, US Hispanics or Latinos, UK, Canada, Austria, Sweden, there are other groups in this group. Everybody is living longer and there are lower death rates, except for one group in the industrialized world, which is poor US whites. Today, in the United States, poor US whites die, like the people I grew up around, die younger than their parents. Very interesting reflection on the state of our culture. So what I want to do now in our last 30 or 35 minutes is start to answer the question of how do I find happiness, right? How do I find meaning in this multifaceted way? I don't think there's a single answer. I think it really depends on your culture, your genetic makeup, your class background, your gender, the historical moment that you're in, and the like. But what we do know, and I'll show you studies of different kinds is that if you can start to build some of these, what I would call kind of moral sentiments and connection tendencies, and then some ways to handle stress. I know you guys don't get stressed out, so you're not very interested in stress. Then you'll do okay in making it through this world. This work is grounded in just sort of basic insights into human nature that comes out of evolutionary thought and certain people who are anthropologists who went and lived with the kind of the hunter-gatherer societies that defined our conditions of evolution for 200,000 years. What we've learned, and this will really lay the foundation for thinking about what gives us meaning and joy in life, is we are a hyper-social species. We do everything together in the context of our evolution. And one of the reasons why was discovered by a female primatologist who studied primates out in the wild, which has to do with these photos right here, which is these are little babies of our primate relatives from whom we branched off evolutionarily 7 million years ago. That's the little sort of miniature chimpanzee that goes by the name of the bonobo. Have you guys heard of the bonobo? That's awesome. Bonobos are matrilineal. They're a little bit smaller than chimps, super social. They have sex all the time. Middle-aged people always ask me in talks I give, like, why in the world did I evolve out of being a bonobo? I want to be a bonobo, you know. And there's a chimpanzee. What are they doing that's kind of unusual for, these are little babies. What are they doing that human babies don't do? Feeding themselves? Sitting upright? They sit by themselves. Human babies are carried for multiple years in their early stages. What we've learned evolutionarily is that our babies, for a lot of different reasons, were born premature, right? Requiring 7 to 49 years to reach the age of independence. These guys are very independent early in life. There's a new finding from studies of hunter-gatherers. Guess how old the average human being is before that person contributes food to the tribe in hunter-gatherer societies? 5, 13, 10, 9. Did you guys cook for your parents, or what was going on? That's pretty amazing. 21. It takes about to the age of graduating from college before it's like, hey, I know how to cook an egg for you, right? So, but what that means is for our species to survive, we had to get those vulnerable beings to the next generation, and it was a game changer. And Darwin anticipated this, where he said, sympathy is our strongest instinct, and the communities that have the most sympathetic members, the kindest, most cooperative, most other-oriented members will survive and flourish and reach the greatest number of offspring. So where I'm heading is to talk about the deep science and then the everyday practices that you guys can do to find delight and ease as you work through Berkeley, which is a very intense school. I'm going to highlight 9 things, talk about them for 3 or 4 minutes each. Feel free to build up on them as we head into the Q&A. The first stop in the happiness equation is to find compassion. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama, coming out of 1,500 years of Tibetan Buddhism, offered, if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. So what we find in our lab at UC Berkeley with neuroscientific tools is if I see images of suffering, like these 2 babies in a famine, what happens, and you can probably feel it in your chest, is this region of your nervous system is activated, called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the largest bundle of nerves in the mammalian nervous system. It helps you look at people in the eye, communicate with your voice, slow down your heart rate, and connect. If you want one measure of how physically healthy a person is, it's how well their vagus nerve is firing at any moment in time. In our lab, time and time again, we find you're physically and psychologically robust if your vagus nerve is firing well. You're less stressed, more connected, and it's activated by compassion. Compassion activates a very old region of your brain or your central nervous system called the periaqueductal gray, which is intercommunicating with this really interesting neuropeptide, a chemical that goes into your brain and your bloodstream called oxytocin. Anybody know what oxytocin is? That's amazing. You are Berkeley undergrads. Oxytocin is a little chemical. When moms give birth to their children, their blood is flooded with oxytocin. So as they look at the baby and they've just sort of opened up their body in ways that take the metabolic energy of 2 marathons, and the baby's covered with fluids and the head's misshapen, has swollen eyes, and she looks at it and goes, "That's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." That's oxytocin tricking her into a life of devotion. And it also tricks the dad or the other partner there. There are really funny studies like this one from economists. You know economists would do this. What if we give oxytocin to people in a bargaining situation? So they gave oxytocin to people and said, hey, give some money to a stranger. If you get a whiff of oxytocin in a nasal spray, half the people give away all their money. Hey, man, I don't know you, but you look like my brother. Here you go, right? Which makes me wonder if we just sprayed a bunch of oxytocin into a Trump. Anyway, I won't go there. Some people think that compassion is a construct. It's produced by cultures. But check out this finding from primatologists who study primates. Our great ape relatives, when the moms lose a baby, they carry the dead baby around very routinely in acts that look like human grieving, right? Very familiar. Not only that, their friends in their primate troop will emit little sounds called coos, which are early primate sounds of compassion, where they're vocalizing to say, I'm sorry about your pain. That led really, this is now a published paper of a bunch of Berkeley students who went all over the world. They gathered sounds of different emotions, played them to people in Pakistan and India and Bhutan. They're little sounds called vocal bursts. Here's a sound I hear from my teenage daughters. Both of them are applying to the UCs right now, which is interesting. See if you know what emotion this is. You guys ready? What emotion is that? Disgust. Yeah, right. Look at Dad. He's got the same haircut he had in high school. God. It's contempt. It's derision. It's superiority. So this is hard to see, but we gathered sounds like this. I'm actually going to test you guys, see how good you guys are. I'm going to count to 3, and I want to hear your best compassion sympathy sound. 1, 2, 3. Man, that was awesome. Only at Berkeley. I did that exercise at San Quentin, where I volunteer. Awesome sounds. 2 days later, I was at Goldman Sachs. All right, give me your best compassion sound. 1, 2, 3. Silence. I was like, come on. I'm from Berkeley. You guys can get loose. 1, 2, 3. I was like, man. So we play these sounds to people all over the world. They guess what emotion just happened. This is chance guessing. And indeed, 70 to 90% of the time, you know what emotions are from little vocal bursts. What that tells us is we have deep roots of compassion in the primate evolution. Okay. This is just a little practice that comes out of compassion and this science. You can, and I'd go to the Greater Good Science Center if you're interested in this. Sort of sit in a place, breathe deeply, think about somebody you really care about. It may be a relative who is ill, the face of a young sister or brother. Somebody, really hold that image in your mind. You do that about once a week. And what you find, this is work by Barb Fredrickson, who did postdoctoral work here at UC Berkeley. Over time, random assignment to a meditation, kindness meditation or control condition, you get rises in happiness. Once a week for a few minutes, just return yourself to kindness. Berkeley is a very compassionate university and important in that way. All right, next stop, gratitude. Adam Smith, the great economist, one of the great thinkers in human history, Wealth of Nations, 1776, also wrote this book called A Theory of Moral Sentiments in the 18th century. in which he made the case, and it's often underappreciated about Adam Smith, the father of economic theory, that he really believed that the moral emotions like kindness and gratitude really held our societies together, right? That this feeling of gratitude or kindness or awe, which I'll talk about next, are really what make for strong societies. Here's his quote, really fitting for the 18th century and kind of the language that they used at the time. "The duties of gratitude are perhaps the most sacred of those which the beneficent virtues prescribe to us." He felt that we had these beneficent, kind, compassionate virtues or moral sentiments that really are the fabric of collaborative society. Gratitude is the feeling of appreciation, wonder, and reverence for things that are given to you. Reverence for things that are given to you. What are some things you feel are sacred that have been given to you? Your acceptance letter. This is sacred. I'm weeping ecstatically. Okay, what else? Life. Did somebody say a burrito, or am I hallucinating? Man, okay. We'll start a burrito club at Berkeley. I bet there is one, actually. So what else is sacred that's been given to you? Friendship? Love? Money? Speech? Family? Nice. I volunteer at San Quentin Prison. We have one of the most energized, sort of change criminal justice set of activities here at UC Berkeley. Prison University projects. Bolt Hall has a lot of stuff. I asked 180 men who were in for life at San Quentin Prison what they felt grateful for, and it was sacred. It was the chance to listen to ideas, the chance to read, the chance to pray, to get outside, to feel the Bay sun, to feel the air. It is one of the deepest intuitions or beneficent virtues that we can always return to as you move through Berkeley, is just take a moment to think about what you're grateful for. My lab, being the lab that it is, really feels that gratitude has deep mammalian roots. And in fact, Frans de Waal, who studies primates, has noted that the primates do this really interesting thing. Have you guys ever noticed that if you go to the zoo and you watch chimpanzees, they just pathologically groom each other? Right? They kind of stop, they start grooming each other, then they run around, they wrestle, then they groom each other. Right? 15% of their waking hours they spend grooming each other. First hypothesis was that they're trying to get bugs out of their fur. Well, primates groom each other when there are no bugs around. And then Frans de Waal made this amazing discovery, which is that if you give a primate a bunch of food, it will share that food with other primates that groom them earlier in the day. Right? They're kind of sort of thinking, wow, I got this good thing. Who gave me good stuff earlier? Well, he groomed me earlier. And off they go and they share the bananas. And here are some acts of food sharing that you see where they're sharing food. I hope you don't do this in the dorm food places for food. Definitely don't do that one. But they start grooming each other because it feels good in exchange for food. Gratitude and trades begin in touch and food sharing. We know from anthropologists who travel around the world that we have these food sharing rituals that build up feelings of gratitude for other people around us. My lab has done some crazy work building upon this, on the idea that one of the ways in which we express the beneficent virtues like gratitude to other people is through touch. It's through the right kind of touch. So here's a finding from our lab. Participants, Berkeley undergrads, came to the lab. There was this big barrier in their lab. They stuck their arm through the barrier. Another person came into the room. They saw that arm. We gave them a list of emotions, and we said, touch that arm and try to communicate these different emotions. Kind of a weird task, isn't it? And the emotions were compassion, gratitude, love, and the like. Then you get touched on the arm, and you have to guess what emotion was just communicated, right? So we go through the procedure. They guess. Chance guessing is down here at 8.33%. And you can see we are 6 to 7 times better than chance. at picking up expressions of gratitude, compassion through simple touch. We had a couple of fascinating gender differences that if you take gender studies classes here at UC Berkeley, it would fit with a lot of gender theory, which is the following. When women tried to communicate anger to the male arm, he had no idea what she was doing. So like, nope, I don't know what that is. And sadly and tragically, and the source of a lot of therapy, when the man tried to communicate compassion to the woman, so okay, let me try that. She's like, anger? She got it all wrong. So I'll let you figure that out in your own romantic lives. So again, what can you do practically to find peace as you move through Berkeley? One of the things that's a really powerful exercise, once a week, practice a little gratitude. Just write down a few things you're grateful for. Orient the mind towards what you're grateful for. Yesterday I was teaching this. A woman talked about getting a terminal diagnosis of cancer. Her entire community sort of bonded around her. She felt love like she'd never felt before. She was grateful for getting cancer. This is a very powerful operation of the mind. And what we know, I apologize about the background here, random assignment, you just think one time, write one time about what you feel grateful for or a control condition. Months later, you're feeling better about life. Okay. Next stop. In our tour of pathways to happiness and less stress and the good life is my favorite emotion is awe. The feeling of being in the presence of things that are bigger than you. Things that transcend your scale, your frame of reference, how you think about the world, and then it requires that you update your thinking. I hope that your undergraduate education, as mine was at UC Santa Barbara, is filled with wonder and awe, where your mind is expanding with new theoretical ideas and findings and ideas from the social sciences. It's fascinating. If you took one of our social sciences, like linguistics, you would immediately start to deconstruct what awe means in different cultures. And for those of you who speak different languages, like my graduate student Yang Bai from China, once you get into a linguistic analysis, you immediately realize awe in the United States, here in Berkeley, feels kind of warm and oceanic, and you're connecting with others. And in China, it translates to two ideograms that mean fearful respect. That's a big difference, isn't it, from how you might intuitively understand awe. Our awe feels like Berkeley or Greek theater. I'm merging with everybody. We're all one. And in China, it's about fearful respect towards people who are above you. Linguistics shows radical different meanings in language. If you consult philosophy and history, what you see, and there are historical studies of emotions, and we can chart how do people talk about emotions and reason about them and describe them at different historical periods in time, what you find is awe has changed pretty dramatically in its history. Early on in the annals of thought, in different traditions, it's about religious conversion. St. Paul on the road to Damascus, hit by a big white light, hears the voice of God, and is transformed, right, from a sinner to a saint. And then if you consult history, what you find, one of our great social sciences history, is that awe, like a lot of concepts, like rights, identity, gender, which is in transformation today, is changing historically. And in awe, what happens, first with Edmund Burke, and then a very important American writer, Ralph Waldo Emerson, is awe becomes secularized. It moves out of religion to nature, into our experiences with other people, right? And in fact, today, the main sources of awe we find in 26 different countries are about other people's generosity and the wonders of nature. So let me show you some studies. This just tells you how amazing awe is. This is a little Berkeley version, a little bit of a, and I challenge you to find your own source of awe. You may feel awe, like a lot of people in our studies do, when you're in cathedrals that are replicating the patterns of nature. You may feel awe reading Mahatma Gandhi, or if you go to Bhutan and you see the Tiger's Nest Monastery at 10,000 feet elevation. A lot of people in Berkeley you're going to find, and I've already given myself away, feel awe when they eat food, and eating food is kind of like church here. And there will be grown-ups who will say, what was my last experience of awe? Oh, that's easy. I was at Chez Panisse, a legendary restaurant in U.S. history in Berkeley, California. Alice Waters, a Berkeley grad. And I tasted her leek soup, and I started to weep, and I gave away all my money, and I took off my clothes, and, I'm like, it was leek soup, buddy, right? There is definitely a lot of awe when you think about how historic the original and real free speech movement was here at UC Berkeley from 1964. That event, if you study it very carefully, was not first influenced by civil rights and then moved into anti-war protests and a lot of interesting influence. And then if you really want to get awe, does anybody know who that is? Iggy Pop, the source of all awe in human history. That is a 68-year-old man who's still a rock and roll star, but that's neither here nor there. All right, let me show you a little science that comes out of the humanities. Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of our great thinkers that you would study in our social science history if you studied American transcendentalism and the radical things that were happening in the 1800s as we became a more secular culture. For Emerson, awe was about being in the woods and nature. In the woods, we return to reason and faith. There I feel that nothing can befall me. No disgrace, no calamity that nature cannot repair. How many of you have been out in nature and felt physically repaired after that experience? Isn't that amazing? You go out in nature, you hike in the redwoods, near the redwoods on this campus, and the next thing you know, you feel a lot better about your mom. It's an incredible process that standing next to a redwood tree, thousands of years old, would cure those ills. I love my mom, by the way. Standing on the bare ground, my head bathed by infinite space, there I feel that all mean egotism vanishes. Awe is an emotion that quiets the voice of the complicated self and makes you connect to others. Let me show you some studies with a little bit of a Berkeley flavor. First up, we took undergrads and we had, like you guys, and we stood them next to the replica of the T-Rex skeleton. Have you guys seen that thing? It is awesome. When Berkeley undergrads stand, they're like, man, this is awesome. Those are my daughters when they used to feel awe towards me. Now it's a little bit of social disapproval. Next to this awesome T-Rex, they suddenly, if we ask them to define who they are, they really start talking about themselves as really defined by common humanity. I'm a human being, I'm made of DNA, I'm related to all sentient beings, I'm part of this amazing universe. If they're staring down the hallway in the very same place, they're much more self-focused. We took Berkeley undergrads to the largest stand of blue gum eucalyptus trees in North America, which is on the Berkeley campus. Have you guys seen these? Okay. We took undergrads and we stood them there and they looked up into these beautiful trees, or they looked up at a science building. And then what we did is we gathered a bunch of measures, and what we find is 1 minute out in the trees, they feel less self-important, less entitled. They need less money for the study. We're like, hey, we're going to pay you $5 for the study. Oh, I don't believe in money, We're like, thank you. So, and then I couldn't graph it here, but they actually were more altruistic to a stranger walking by. What we found is little bursts of awe out in nature, and I really encourage you, and I'll show you some other data for why this is important. 1 or 2 minutes of awe out in nature once a week actually quiet what is known as the inflammation system. The inflammation system is part of your immune response. It's little proteins that attack pathogens in your body. When you have the flu, your body's inflamed, and it's attacking the virus in your body. It's great in the short term, but if you have chronically elevated inflammation, you're vulnerable to cardiovascular disease, immune problems, diabetes, and the like. And what we find is little bursts of nature and awe quiet the inflammation response. That has led UC Berkeley to partner with the Sierra Club with a bunch of our amazing undergrads. And we take veterans in high school kids who haven't been camping or outdoors ever in their lives because they don't have the resources in their community to go whitewater rafting for a day. You can imagine the research assistants who had to coordinate high school students research whitewater rafting. It's kind of a spectacle. And here's what we find. Just after a day of whitewater rafting, high school kids from under-resourced communities like Richmond are less stressed, they're getting along better with other people, they're happier with life. Our veterans, there are 2.4 million veterans in the United States who are suffering prolifically and underserved, and a day out on the river leads to a 28% drop in PTSD symptoms. So get outdoors. Okay. This all work led to kind of crazy stuff that the social sciences, a lot of our grads will go to Facebook and Google and do startups and develop various things. And I've taken some of our Berkeley students down to consult at Facebook. They asked me, and I'll show you some data on this, to redesign some emoticons. So I asked a Pixar artist to draw some emoticons of different emotions, like admiration. Isn't it a nice expression? Admiration. I'm contemplating. I'm taking a philosophy class. It's kind of hard. But I'm determined, and I'm going to do really well, and I'm going to stay up late at night. But I'm devoted to UC Berkeley. There we go. You can actually code the muscle movements underneath these drawings. There's the sympathy expression. We did the voice earlier. Isn't that a great expression, the disagreement? Once you're a parent, you really love this expression because little 2-year-olds are like, that's what they do. So that led to a sticker pack at Facebook. These are actually hundreds, over billions of these have been sent based on science. The most popular one is, of course, love and anger. We then captured a bunch of data, hundreds of millions of these worldwide, and we mapped the emotional profile, and anthropologists have been interested in this for some time, of what cultures are like. And yes, indeed, there are cultures of love. If you go abroad and you live in Spain, France, or Italy, red means they send more of these emoticons, you will probably fall in love because there's more love in those cultures. I love this finding. This is sympathy. Yellow means very little sympathy. Red means a lot. Look what happens when you step foot into Canada. That's mind-blowing. And then there's angry cultures. But there is righteous anger, and I hope you marshal it as the interesting times unfold. Yes, indeed. And you can only imagine our political campaign, what happened here. There are all cultures and the like. Okay, let me take 10 more minutes, 15 more minutes of your time, talk about a few more tips for happiness, and then open it up for 15 minutes of Q&A. Second stop on finding joy and happiness in life, and this only becomes more poignant as you get older, is to find strong community, is to be connected to other people in whatever way you can. Well, we know social connections, sociologists have documented, add 10 years to your life expectancy. It is one of the strongest boosters of just wellness and happiness is to be connected to others. I want to show you a funny study that actually has led us to start to study team chemistry of the Golden State Warriors and the San Francisco Giants, who are not enjoying great team chemistry right now, but I won't comment on that. I had a graduate student who was a Berkeley undergrad and became a graduate student, Michael Krause, and he's now a professor at Yale University. And Michael and I played pickup basketball, and I hope do I have any pickup basketball players in here? It's one of the great sports of all time. But Michael and I were kind of joking. He always got the better of me, kind of dominated different leagues. We were joking about pickup basketball that you play in pickup basketball, you bang into each other, it's very physical. I've played in 3,000 pickup basketball games everywhere around the country until it just wore out my knees. And I noticed that I have never seen a physical fight in a pickup basketball game, even though we're banging into each other, smacking each other, breaking bones and the like. I was like, that is more peaceful than the average family reunion in the United States, right? It's more peaceful than vegan shopping for vegetables at Berkeley Bowl, where I saw two guys with ponytails get into a fight over bok choy, right? And I was like, what's going on? It's super violent. People are destroying their bodies, and yet it's peaceful. And people, are, in general, sort of leave in a sense of camaraderie. And we thought it has to be all the touch that is the very elements of social connection. So, grounded in that observation, Michael Krauss and a team of Berkeley undergrads coded all of the touch in every team in the National Basketball Association. It took us 17 hours to code one game of each team. On average, teams touch each other about 1 minute and 48 seconds during the game. And here's what you see. As people touch, they high five, they fist bump, they arm embrace, they bear hug. Men like to hit each other in the head when things are going really well. They arm embrace, they chest bump, they flying hip bump. And then when you guys get your A's on exams, I will see you in Sproul Plaza, fly through the air and chest bump, right, after you scorch on those exams in economics or whatever it is. And what we found, quite remarkably, is that the more that the teams touched each other at the start of the year, the more games they won over the course of the season, right? Social connection, trust, encouragement leads to better performance. What we've now learned is the Phoenix Suns, as part of their big data, now actually count high fives. Like, are you giving high fives to your teammates? Really interesting application of the power of community. All right, let me round out our discussion of happiness. And this may be most germane to you or relevant, which is how do you handle stress? The data show, and I hope you remember this finding, although you will know this. Your generation knows more than any generation in human history. It's called the Flynn effect. He was an economist who found that people have actually gotten smarter over time. Your generation works harder than the previous generation. Today, people work 104. Tell your parents that. I know your parents are like, you millennials don't work. And I hope you say to them, yeah, Dad, well, the biology you studied in high school, today, Nobel Prizes were given to biology that high school students master today. There's no comparison. You guys are a supercharged generation, but regrettably, you're also a stressed out generation. And there are nice longitudinal data that show if you looked at how stressed out the average human being was when I was in college, sitting where you are, I am much less stressed out than you guys are today. So what we can do is we can draw on this really neat science of happiness to start to think about what are some of the basic things you can do to handle the stresses of Berkeley. This is a serious university. We do not call you guys up if you don't show up for a class like liberal arts schools. We don't coddle you. We have high expectations. This is an intense place. This just tells us what we've learned from different sciences of what are some of the sources of physiological stress. And we know the big events in life are sources of stress. We know from public health, if you have a physical ailment or suffering from physical disease, like my brother is, you feel stress. We know from African American studies and people like Rudy Mendoza-Denton here at UC Berkeley that if you encounter sexism as a woman or racism as an African American or a person of an ethnic background, you will feel the physiological sort of elevation of stress. We know now from data around the world that economic inequality is a very profound source of stress. When you go to equal cultures or more egalitarian cultures, they don't have this ambient stress in the atmosphere that you do in the United States, and it's worth thinking about. So what I'd like to draw your attention to are 3 ideas for handling the stresses of the next 4 or 5 years. One is that I encourage you to get what we might call a contemplative practice. How many of you do mindfulness on a regular basis? Okay, that's great. I'll define it in just a second. How many of you do yoga? Or that's amazing. Comes out of Hinduism, right? And the great yogic traditions that are 4,000 or 5,000 years old. How many of you go to Burning Man and blow it all out in one event? I won't ask, okay? There are a lot of ways that we can reduce stress. Let me just show you one that just has to do with breathing. Okay, everybody put your feet on the ground, relax. Okay, rest your hands on your thighs. And we're just going to breathe 3 times. When you breathe, I'm going to count for you, but just hang on a sec. When you breathe in, expand your chest. When you breathe out, feel the air go through your nasal passage. We'll do it 3 times, each time to a count of 6. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out and feel that air. Final one. Breathe in. Breathe out. How'd that make you guys feel? What happened? Relax, weeping. I'm going to hit the road and follow the Grateful Dead. There's nothing spiritual. It's just a physical exercise. What we know from the great traditions is breathing is fundamental to calming stress because it calms down your stress response. Find a moment each week to do some deep breathing. Let me tell you about another way to handle stress from a very interesting experience that I had that is uniquely Berkeley. I was in my office one day. I get a call from this guy right here, who's a friend of mine. That's Pete Dacher, who works right down the road at Pixar. He was trying to think about, he's a director. He's like, I'm going to do a movie. I'm thinking about my next movie. I was like, hey, Pete, well, Up. He did Up. Did you guys see Up? Wasn't Up amazing? Totally the best portrayal of love you could ever imagine. And Pete's like, I'm thinking about doing a movie. I'm like, hey, I could do a voice for a movie. He's like, no, I'm not interested in that. You know, he's like, I'm thinking of doing a movie about human emotion. I'm like, God, I teach human emotion for 20 years at UC Berkeley. It's like, and it's a movie about like the emotions that somebody is sort of grappling with as they go through a really tough time in life. And I'm like, that's what I teach at UC Berkeley. And it's the main character, I think, is going to be an 11 or 12-year-old girl who's going through pre-adolescence and struggles and identity stuff. I had an 11, 12-year-old girl going through all of that, as all girls do. And I was like, Pete, I'll talk to you in 5 years. Thanks a lot. You know. So I had the great honor of being with Pete and assisting as a scientific consultant on this movie, Inside Out. As you guys know, did you see Inside Out? Who liked Inside Out? It's an amazing movie. It is UC Berkeley. There's a lot of UC Berkeley and Pixar films, as you know. It's got a lot of Berkeley streets and Berkeley buildings that are built into the film because a lot of Pixar comes from UC Berkeley. Some of you will work at Pixar. As you'll recall, Pixar, Inside Out is about trauma. As one Berkeley undergrad said, he's one of my favorite Berkeley undergrads. He's a veteran. He was homeless. He's a returning student. He's got all these piercings. He talked all the time. He's brilliant. He's going to med school. He raised his hand when I was talking to my emotion class about Inside Out. And I was like, what do you guys think of this film? He raised his hand. He's like, man, that's the darkest film I've ever seen in my life, you know. And it is, because the girl is suffering anxiety and depression and sadness, flips out, starts running away, as you guys recall, has these spectacular temper tantrums that are based on the science of emotion that UC Berkeley will teach you about. And then, in the movie, is the most unlikely hero in Hollywood history, who is this figure right here, who is the lovable and adorable Sadness. And what the movie tells us is what I told Pete Dacher about, which I want to tell you about, which is don't react against difficult times in life. You will have stress. You will lose things. Grades will be tough. This is a tough school. And that's okay. You just embrace them openly and accept the hard stuff that comes with life. Because what we know, as portrayed in the wisdom of the movie, which is, wow, you lose things as you develop. You lose things in life. And yet, in loss, we get all this wisdom. There's so much wisdom in the character of Sadness in Inside Out. And what we know, really simply, is that when we take on difficult things in life, challenging exams, stressful romances, we're going to have a lot of political protests here at Berkeley this year. I hope you guys are engaged. Get your battle gear. And I'll talk about that at the end. Approach them non-judgmentally. It's part of life. And it's one of the great things we don't shy away from here at Berkeley. This isn't a university that's tucked away in some remote part of New England. We are full-on involved in culture and embrace it. All right, let me tell you finally, and then round out as we head into Q&A for 15 minutes as planned. The final piece of happiness-related wisdom or meaning-related wisdom is narrative. And this comes out of multiple social sciences. History is a narrative about events in our world. Sociology studies the narratives of families over time, or the narrative of a woman's identity and how it's changing over time, or an ethnic or racial identity if you go to ethnic studies or African American studies or psychology. The great Pulitzer Prize-winning biologist E.O. Wilson said, there are two ways that we understand the world. One is with science and deduction and proof and logic and data and all statistics and the like. And another is narrative, right? In rich stories about who we are. And all I can tell you is this is the central task of your intellectual development at UC Berkeley, is to tell the story of who you are. And what we know from psychological science is that your story about yourself is going to have all these incredible conflicts. Conflicts between, should I be conventional and sort of fit my parents' expectations, or should I be radical, right? Should I honor freedom or fold into a community? Should I pursue self-expression or devotion to others? That is the nature of the human identity, is to grapple with these great conflicts that Shakespeare has grappled with and history has grappled with, and you will grapple with. Narratives involve mistakes. You will make mistakes. In our mistakes, we find our greatest wisdom. One of my heroes, Charles Darwin, wanted to be a doctor, bombed out of med school, wanted to be a priest, or his parents wanted him to be a priest, couldn't handle that, and he stumbled onto a little ship called the Beagle and went for 5.5 years around the world and changed the world with his observations. Those were mistakes that led to his discoveries, and they'll be part of your identity. And then narratives in your life have settings like Berkeley and Sproul Plaza and Strata Cafe. It has characters like people you'll fall in love with, and I hate to tell you, fall out of love with, and shout at and become arrested by, or whatever you do, right? It'll have themes and vivid images and the like. And what the science tells us is when you handle stress and when you handle the promise of Berkeley and you just keep engaging in this amazing story that is your life, you will do better. Berkeley undergrads have the most amazing narratives of any undergrads I've ever been around. And I've been around them at Oxford and Stanford and elsewhere. You come from all different backgrounds. You're going to go in many different directions, and you are going to change the world. So tell those stories to handle the stress. So let me tell you why these social sciences matter today, and then open it up for questions. This is Berkeley. This shouldn't surprise you. We worry a lot about this condition of our country, right? I think a lot about it, as do my social scientific colleagues. We worry about the fact that, as Paul Pearson, a political scientist here at Berkeley, has championed, we have historic levels of inequality. It's not a Republican thing or a Democrat thing. Our policies that led to inequality began with Jimmy Carter. Clinton really amplified mass incarceration, which our law school is worried about. This isn't a Republican or a Democrat thing. Sadly, it's an American thing. We should worry about it. We worry about poverty because a lot of our students, like my neighbors, like Guillermo Campos, come out of poverty. The UC lifts people out of poverty, and we think about, well, how do we, as a culture, meet that problem of the day? I'm not going to, we worry at UC Berkeley about the 2.4 million people in prison. All of the data show we used to have 1 million beds for people who suffer from mental illness. Now we have 100,000. We used to have 300,000 people in prison. Now we have 2.4 million. Those are crossing lines or trajectories. When I go to San Quentin prison, a third of the people in prison should be getting mental health care. They have diagnosable conditions. And we worry about children and our veterans as part of this. So, what's common across the social sciences that I've alluded to? Political science, African American studies, ethnic studies, history, sociology, anthropology, psychology, demography, and geology, and the like. I think there's a commitment to the idea that we are a social species, and we're only as good as the conditions of our social living. There are facts. And you will learn how to engage in reasonable discourse about data and evidence and truth. We may not know the absolute truth, but we can get closer, right? And that's what social sciences do. We have theories and hypotheses, and we get wrong. We're wrong, and we're humbled, and we have data, and we have statistics, and we have methods to figure out what the world is like. And we are committed to one of that foundation of reasonable discourse, which is partially being threatened today. And then finally, what you will do will be an engine of social progress. That the social sciences here at UC Berkeley help design the computer, they help design the smartphone, they're down at Apple, it's a big presence at Google and Facebook. A lot of you will work with big data. It's at Pixar. It's in the healthcare system. It helped reduce solitary confinement in American prisons. Our social science is a vibrant, it changed gender identity and our grappling of what it means to be of a different identity. It comes out of social science, and you will be part of that, and we really look forward to it. All I want to say for you is, here are some sources for you guys: greatergood.berkeley.edu, ggia.berkeley.edu, all free. Here are a couple of books. It's an honor to be here with you today. Welcome to Berkeley, and I will see you as the years progress for you, so thanks a lot. So we have 12 minutes for questions and answers. Wait, we got a microphone, so.
Is it working?
Press on.
Test, test, test.
All right. Good to have you here. All right, we're going to do some Q&A for 10 minutes.
What do you think about the Franz Leibowitz quote, happiness is a sensation, not a condition?
So the question is, and I want you guys to ask questions about happiness. What do we think? Franz Leibowitz is a famous photographer who has the quote, and I'm glad you're quoting people who matter to you. Happiness is a sensation and not a condition. And I think that's partially true. Happiness comes in a lot of physical sensations like the chills. But one of the mistakes we can't make is to think that happiness is not connected to conditions. So we know if you're raised without a lot of money, it's going to hurt your happiness, and that's an important social condition. So it's both. Yeah. And we'll get you in the back, don't worry.
This question is about the study about awe, and you said that compared to control, people who had experienced awe in nature, they were less greedy, for instance. But how does this compare with just normal physical exertion, just being outside and walking? How, like?
So the question is, I showed you a graph like, whoa, if I go to the trees, or if I'm looking up at a building, is it just physicality that produces less materialism and less entitlement and calm? And in that's a really terrific question. It means we have to control for different variables. In that study, they walk the same amount, they're in the same physical place, they're standing in the same spot, but they're either looking up into the trees or looking at an unappealing building. So we controlled for that. But more broadly, in the awe literature, we have to look at whether physical exertion gives you happiness like awe does, and that'll be an important control. Let's go over here. I'm going to get you guys. Hang on.
So earlier you mentioned, you briefly went over the constituents of compassion, and one of them was always wanting other people to be happy. I've come in contact with a lot of people who refuse happiness themselves and like tend to be in the state of their own sorrow and their own misery. So my question is, at what point do you let your obligation of other people's happiness towards other people's happiness come in the way of their own denial of it?
Yeah, so one of the hardest things to grapple with in the science of happiness is your own suffering, right? And then the suffering of, even harder in a way, is the suffering of people you really care about. And given 41% of Americans will grapple with some mental health condition at some time in their lives, depression, OCD, anxiety, and so forth. So this is just part of the human equation. And I think what we're learning from the human happiness literature is this idea of acceptance and mindfulness, like it's okay to suffer. I have a genetic propensity toward anxiety. It was hard as a kid, served me well as an adult, right? It's had a lot of pain. I've had 50 panic attacks, and I learned that you just have to embrace and to accept. And you get a lot of wisdom when you go to East Asian cultures, right? Where they just say, look, this is part of the human mind. It's okay. Don't criticize yourself. Don't shame yourself. Don't demand that you be happy. And then you have to apply that wisdom to other people. You will have, many of you in this room will fall in love with somebody who is suffering from some mental health condition, and you have to embrace that, right? You will have children, even harder, as I do, who have a particular condition that they're grappling with and that derails them a little, and you have to embrace. And if you force happiness on yourself or other people, it's going to go awry, and this becomes one of the great challenges of that equation. So it's a terrific question. Yeah?
To your opinion, how do we measure happiness in the best way?
In a brain? Or
No, in the best way.
Yeah, so science is rooted in measurement. I love measurement. What we do with measures is we take an abstract concept, right, like happiness, and as you remember that first slide, it can mean many things. And then I look at you and I say, how happy are you? And what I believe, as do most scientists, is we need multiple measures of happiness. So I can look at the muscular movement around your eyes and know you're happy. I can look at the tone of voice. I can look at levels of oxytocin. Brain function, is your left hemisphere more active than your right, tends to be correlated with happiness. So the more measures we get, the better we capture the construct or the phenomenon. Up.
So I've heard in the past that from people that happiness can't be like a permanent being. You can be content as a permanent being. First of all, is that true? And if so, like, how long can happiness last?
Well, I think that's a really neat question. I think that what we find is when we study, if I ask how happy you all are, on average, on a 10-point scale, this group would give a 7, right? We're kind of happy, and most people are kind of happy. But what you find is that within that general feeling about life, of it being okay, we fluctuate, right? And you may have periods of euphoria, and you've fallen in love, and you're ecstatic. And then you may have periods where you're feeling anxious and worried. So both are true. It's like a particle and a wave, which is that we have this sense of how well our life is going, but there are a lot of fluctuations within that. So it is both permanent and ever-changing. Yes? So is there a difference between happiness and bliss? I love Berkeley audiences. Is there a difference between happiness and bliss? Yeah. So happiness is just how good you feel about life. Bliss is a state that there's very little scientific data on this, and we're starting to look at this in the lab, where you feel euphoric and ecstatic. And that ecstasy tends to have certain really interesting subjective qualities, like time doesn't seem to exist. You live in this timeless world of like, each second is like an eternity, you know. And you feel like your sense of self has no boundaries with other people, subject-object merging, and you feel like everything is made of the same stuff. Like, I love my rugs so much, it's just like me, right? So bliss has these really cool properties. So why don't we aim for bliss then? Because it's not sustainable. You wouldn't be a very good worker if you had these properties. You wouldn't do too well in marriage, you know, so it's good to have the other emotions. Yeah? Oh, so are UC Berkeley students happy? And I would say in the happiness literature, we differentiate between two big constructs. And this is important for you guys. One is like, am I having a lot of daily pleasure? And the second one is, do I feel alive with purpose and meaning in life? And I think that Berkeley, as an undergraduate institution, doesn't quite have as much daily pleasures as other places, because you're walking through Telegraph and it's tense and it's got, you know, and people are protesting and stuff, but it has a lot of deep purpose. And the undergrads who come out of this institution, when I go teach alumni, which I do a lot of, and when you guys are 70 and 80 years old, they really feel like the Berkeley education stayed with them for a long time. Deep purpose. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
As time has progressed, it seems like the mental health field has expanded, and we've introduced all kinds of medications, and there's been a lot more research. Yet a lot of studies show that society and our generation seems to be more stressed, more unhappy. Do you think that's simply because people are being more honest with the research, or is it just that society has shifted towards that?
Yeah. So there's a graph I could show you guys, and it's amazing, which is it starts in 1983, and then it goes to like 2000, and then 2009, and it's a 8 or 10 item measure of stress. Like, do you feel like you have too much work and not enough resources to get done what you need to get done? And stress levels have risen over the course of 30 years, and you are, it's pretty clear, experiencing more stress than 15, 20 years ago, as I stated earlier. The question you can ask is that just a bias? Like everybody can say they're stressed, or we like to say we're stressed, or mom and dad give us more money if we say we're stressed, or whatever it is. But I think it's real. And I think that it has to do with a couple of things. One is the economy has changed, and it is a different economy than it was 30 or 40 years ago. Two is it's harder to get into college. It's a lot harder to get into college. I wouldn't have gotten into UCs, as many UCs as you guys did. And then I think that you guys are grappling with, you know, climate change and some deeper existential stuff that is stress producing. And the challenge for you is to use these forms of science to say, okay, how do I kind of get a handle of this stress? And you can. And then what do I do work-wise to reduce stress in my culture? So, yeah.
So I think we've all heard like the saying "fake it till you make it." Do you think that saying is true, and can it apply to happiness, and to what extent?
Yeah, so I appreciate you guys staying on. So when I teach human happiness to prisoners, medical doctors, school teachers, thousands of people, I say, look, there are 12 things: gratitude, compassion, awe, laughter, a sense of justice, connect to people, cooperate, forgive, touch, handle stress through breathing, mindfulness, storytelling, right? The stuff that I talked about today. I treat those like an exercise regime. And you may not find them really easily in your day. And so what I recommend that you do, and it's not fake it, but it's practice it, right? If we do crunches, or we try to eat steel-cut oats in the morning, right? I'm sounding like a middle-aged guy. I apologize, because there it is, you know. And that becomes like, God, I don't want to do this, and you start doing it as an exercise regime. I encourage you to do this stuff, as I said, fake it, if you will. Like, okay, once a week, I'm just going to deviate on my path to class and go stand in a beautiful part of campus. Just take it in. Once a week, I'm just going to think about what I'm grateful for. Once a week, I'll think about service. Once a week, I'll make sure my friends and I are really laughing, right? Once a week, I'll write a little about my identity. That probably is 15 minutes of work, 20 minutes of work a week, and it will change your health and happiness. And so you just got to find it and practice it rather than faking it. Okay.
Thank you. So I noticed that in your lecture there was a motif about how relationships are able to cultivate a strong sense of happiness among humans. And with today's advent of social media, we've been more readily accessible to these types of relationships.
Yeah.
How has then social media been able to produce more or depreciate the level of happiness in human society?
Wow. So I'm going to give you some bad news, and I'll probably get fired from Facebook, but because I do some consulting down there. I'll take. You guys don't even do Facebook, so it's not even relevant to you, but it's illustrative, which is that on average, people are on Facebook 59 minutes a day in the United States. It's higher in other cultures. And the data, I have a postdoc in my lab who measures how happy people are. He pings people on their smartphones, says, hey, how happy are you? And what are you doing right now? And they're like, well, I'm doing the dishes, doing homework, sleeping, you woke me up, you know, laughing with friends, in romantic activity, and so forth. And yes, indeed, romantic activity is the #1 source of happiness, so you guys are in for some good fun. But what's fascinating is out of, I think it's 28 activities, being on the new social media ranks 26th in terms of happiness. It largely is neutral or negative, and I think it's something that you need to do less of to cultivate your mind and find happiness. So it has great promise. They'll improve it, but there are better ways to get happiness. Yes? Yeah. Yeah, so do we value productivity over happiness? Yeah, we are. Again, this is good data to counter your parents. We work harder than other cultures. There's no comparison. A lot of the data show you're the most hardworking undergrads in the world. When you go abroad, and if you study abroad, you're going to be blown away. Like, this is all you guys do, you know? And that's why American universities are superpowers, right? We love productivity. There's a big upside to it, but it's costing people. And so your job is to figure out how to make organizations happier because it actually makes them more efficient and productive. I'm mindful of time. We're going to take 3 more questions. Yes? Yeah, so self-actualization is like eudaimonia, which I talked about earlier, which is if part of your task here at Berkeley is to figure out who you are. right? And it's the great task of philosophy and the social sciences, which is to use all this knowledge and to say, what do I care about? What do I get most emotional about, right? Is it justice, or is it caring for people who suffer, or intellectual discovery, or laughter, or whatever it is? So figure out your core passions and then do things that allow you to actualize those, to implement them. And there are pretty good data showing if you can just find what you care about here, and that translates to particular majors, and then go do it, that's one of the big sources of happiness. So they're very highly correlated. Yeah? Okay. Yeah, you know, is being happy, does it undermine ambition and productivity? And that's one of the myths in the literature. And in general, what you find is really creative people, really successful people, people who rise to positions of leadership tend to laugh more and love people more and are more generous and find more joy and handle stress better. So it actually works exactly opposite to that cultural intuition, which is happiness is an engine of doing well in the world. I'm going to take a couple more, so you two. Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you, the science that I just worked through is massively relevant to the divisive politics of the day, right? So what we are doing at the personal level is, you know, kind of empathy-based exercises that will get people of different political divides to get along, and that's on a scaled-up version. I can tell you that Facebook and you know, identifying trolls is rooted in social science. It's rooted in conceptualizations of threat and hate speech and racism, and how do you identify it in patterns of speech. Linguistics and psychology would be great at that, and they're using our science to knock out those kind of terrorist threats. And then I think that the critique of the politics of today and the problems of today are in a way the outgrowth of our social sciences, right? Our social sciences present one view of gender, and another kind of view really challenges it, right, and finds it antagonistic. The data are clear that racist policies cost people in terms of health and life expectancy, and it's a question of whether our politicians will listen to that. So, you know, it's not random that the Trump administration does not like social science or data, and it's not random he's targeting UC Berkeley. So it's we're right in the thick of it. So it's worth thinking about those issues. Final question. So, you know, one of the really neat things about social sciences and happiness is it allows you to like tackle these big questions like, why the US, there are cultures that do really well in terms of happiness. Mexico, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Norway, Holland, right? And then you can beg the question like, what's going on in those countries? What do you think it is? Why are they so happy? Yeah. Yeah, community, family, connection, and the like. We're doing pretty well, right? We're kind of in the second tier in terms of like overall happiness with some major exceptions. And there you can start to link what is it about this culture that cultivates happiness, freedom, self-expression, individual rights, with some glaring exceptions like mass incarceration, right? Then you go to the countries where there's, like a lot of the Eastern Bloc countries are very unhappy because of oppression and lack of media and so forth. So what political scientists do is they say, these data are fascinating when you look at these broad trends, like why does Scandinavia do so well? What are they doing policy-wise where their people seem to be happier? What's costing the United States in terms of better happiness? And I've highlighted a couple, which is the isms of racism and inequality and incarceration. We can now chart how economic inequality in a region or a county or a city costs you in terms of your happiness. So the happiness question becomes very relevant to thinking about countries. Have a great time here at Berkeley. I teach happiness, human emotion. I suspect I'll see you. I hope it's a meaningful and happy place for you. Congratulations, and go make the world better. We need you.